English translation 471st Contact, Part 2. Tuesday, 16th of September 2008, 14:16 hours.
What you are saying about understanding what we have spoken of, about the prophetic and foretelling words, that is what it is all about, that it is understood what is or was spoken of. Regarding the photos, that will probably work. And with regard to your absence, you will probably go on holiday again to work a lot, I suppose. And if you're going to be away so long, I would like to ask you if you can predict who will win the presidential race in the USA.
Yes, I can. Barack Obama will be the 44th President of the USA. 140 years after the abolition of slavery, he will be the man who breaks the tradition of white rule of the U.S. presidency. Like Mikhail Gorbachev, his spirit form is also tracing back to the old squad, so it is to be assumed that he too will fulfill his duty and change some things for the benefit and good of the U.S. citizens, and also for the better and good for the earthly mankind and the world, as it is given by his destiny. Unfortunately, due to the color of his skin, he is very vulnerable to racists who are out to kill him. Regrettably, racism in the USA is still widespread through racist organizations, groups, and individuals, which is why Barack Obama, as an African American, must be very concerned for his life as well as his family. And as far as our vacation is concerned, it is indeed the case that we use it to learn a lot of new things and expand our knowledge.
Aha. Regarding Barack Obama, that his spirit form was part of the old retinue, I did not know that. But I know that he cannot be sure that he is already a presidential candidate because of the racists. But it is very gratifying that he is part of the team, so it is to be hoped that he will move and achieve some valuable things.
About what you know now. You have to keep silent until the elections are held because otherwise the danger increases dramatically that Barack Obama will be assassinated before his presidency becomes a reality. The racists would be even more eager to kill him if they knew that he, and not McCain, would become president. So the election period would be more dangerous for him. But even after he has received his presidency, the danger will be very great for him because the racists will not rest easy. And it is to be said about McCain that if he came to power, everything would be even worse when President Bush went about it all and caused evil and criminal acts in his own country and in foreign states.
I understand, so I will stick to it. Yes, I can well imagine that McCain would be even worse than Bush, because he was a soldier in Vietnam. So he has learned how to kill human beings, and therefore does not consider human beings' lives to be valuable. So as President of the USA, he would also live out this attitude. Yes, we have that in common, and so I am not bored either. But tell me, one thing is not quite clear to me yet. At the 385th official contact conversation on the 21st of April 2005, we talked about the monster waves that appear on the world's oceans and cause ships to sink.
I remember that very well because actually I wanted to say something more about it, but time was running out. The reason why I am only explaining to you today the matter of Barack Obama concerning his spirit form is that I also received this information only 2 days ago via the High Council from the Arahat Athersata Plain. And what you say about McCain, my probability calculations also show that.
Aha. What else did you want to explain regarding the monster waves?
Such monster waves, or killer waves, respectively rogue waves, as they are also called by sailors, do not only appear on the oceans, but also on big lakes. They are equally dangerous for shipping on the seas and on the big lakes, because they cause even very large ships, such as ocean liners, but also large oil platforms to capsize, smash them by the force of the water masses, or simply break them in two. However, this is not uncommon, as might be assumed, because in fact such giant waves occur practically daily, even if they are not observed and do not cause any visible damage. Such wave formations are usually piled up by small waves that quickly join together and become a single large structure, especially when countercurrents or counterwaves are involved. Such giant waves are also created by large storms and countercurrents, as well as by seaquakes, and also by the fact that large waves break at islands and their outer sides pass them on both sides, only to reassemble on the other side of the island with enormous strength and become a monster wave. These not seldom reach 20 to 30 or more, rarely even 40 and 45 meters high. Here and there it also happens that two such gigantic waves follow each other at a greater distance. It is also a fact that many more ships disappear without a trace on the oceans and large lakes, together with their crews, than are made public. This also applies to the Bermuda Triangle and the Japanese Devil's Sea, where, in addition to the fact that methane gas clouds rising from the seafloor cause ships and airplanes to be torn apart, monster waves also occur very frequently, through which ships are smashed, torn in two, or simply capsized and torn to the bottom.
Heading towards a monster wave is probably the only way to prevent the worst from happening.
That is true, but it still offers no guarantee for certain ships that they will not be destroyed and will not sink in the floods. If a ship, no matter how big and powerful it is hit from the side by a monster wave, there is little chance that it will not be destroyed and will not sink, and that human beings will still be able to save themselves.
You say that ships disappear quite often. Can you give me a number on that?
Worldwide, there are usually between 95 and 105 ships of all sizes, from the smallest to the largest, that disappear without a trace every year.
Yes, that's about 2 ships a week.
That corresponds to what I said.
And you do not really hear much or nothing about that. Joy and happiness, in other words, to those who paddle around the world's oceans and on the Great Lakes, like sailors and holiday makers, or those who travel as passengers on ships. Not very pleasant, what you are explaining. But something else. Could you get me the peach stones?
Ah, yes, of course. Here they are. They are 2 different kinds, and the fruits will not grow as big as the ones Quetzal brought you a stone from. These 2 here bring some dark fruit if you can grow trees from them, and these 2 here bring light fruit. You can also tell the difference by the color of the stones, Edward.
Thank you very much, my friend. Yes, I actually only wanted to have 1 stone, but of course I am very happy that you brought me 4. Thanks. Man, what was that?
It was like an explosion. I also felt a faint shock wave.
I felt that too. But it must have been right outside the office window.
I feel the need to go to my flying apparatus and check out what happened. It would not take long.
You just disappeared, my friend.
Here I am again, but it took a little longer than I thought.
Just 20 minutes. What was it, and why did you take off so quickly?
I was startled by what happened. Our safety, you understand?
I understand, but what caused that little thunderclap?
It was a natural phenomenon, but one that should not actually occur in this area, namely an atmospheric shooting which was caused by an electrical discharge, as it normally only happens over larger waters. The control devices in my flying apparatus showed that, strangely enough, not far from the window of your working room, a haze of fine water particles had formed, coming from the well and the basin. This cloud formation has become electrically charged and exploded due to the influences of the environment, according to which you referred to it as a thunderclap, which is exactly what it was.
Yes, then it was not dangerous.
But it could have been dangerous, and also the shock wave could have been perceived, and those cannot be called harmless.
Shock waves are not harmless. That is news to me. What is dangerous about them? I have been hit by many shock waves, explosions of explosives, explosions of self-made fireworks, 2 bomb explosions, a ball lightning, and also several times by earthquakes.
Shock waves of the kind you mentioned are actually not harmless, because they can cause damage to the brain, which can lead to memory impairment up to amnesia, but can also cause simple headaches up to chronic migraine, which is usually associated with great nausea.
Then you could call this brain damage a shockwave trauma, I guess.
That is actually what we also call this damage. Depending on the strength of the explosion, the shock waves reach up to about 2,500 kilometers per hour and are therefore very far-reaching. And when human beings or another life form is hit by the deeply penetrating waves, then these do not only hit the brain, but also the whole body, and therefore all organs that are being compressed, which in turn causes bad effects on the blood vessels, and therefore also on the blood circulation, and therefore also on the brain and the heart. The stronger the shock waves are, the more extensive the damage they cause, which is not reparable, but, on the contrary, develops into incurable long-term effects that can affect the normal conduct of life to the point of intolerability. Shock waves cause strong oscillations in the body and in the blood vessels, and thus a chain reaction of biochemical processes, which in turn and inevitably, depending on the strength of the oscillations, have a destructive effect on the brain and body cells. In very severe cases of shock waves, their oscillations can even cause blood vessels to burst in the body and cause internal bleeding and even disturbances of consciousness.
I did not know that. The fact that the little thunder outside my office window turned out to be an atmospheric shooting will again tempt many a critic, antagonist and know-it-all to accuse both of us, at least me, of lying and fantasy. Just like when, on the 24th of April 1990, in the presence of witnesses, Bernadette, Silvano, and Natan, a bolt of lightning rushed down from a cloudless blue sky and struck 3 meters from the top of a birch tree behind the fairy tale pond. It was at that time when Silvano and I wanted to set a big stone in front of the fairy tale pond. After the lightning had struck the treetop, it hit me in the thumb of my right hand, chased through my arm up into my shoulder, and then down the right side of my body and slammed into the stone, from which it blasted out a piece about the size of my palm because I was leaning on the stone with my right knee.
I remember the event. You were very lucky that you touched the stone with your knee and thus created a diversion for the energy beam, because otherwise you would have been killed by the energy. But in terms of what you say, yes, it is not important that adversaries, critics, and know-it-alls now also make stupid speeches about what is happening outside the window of your workroom. For in doing so, they are only proving their own inadequacy and stupidity, as well as their failure to understand natural events.
I don't care. Besides, there are things between heaven and earth that school wisdom cannot dream of, and that are still unfathomable even to scientists. And those who talk foolishly lack the necessary intelligence to fathom, let alone understand, unknown events. Such mindless Philistines can also be found among those would-be scientists who are only pure theoreticians. To them, both the deeper secrets of nature remain completely hidden and their events incomprehensible in every way, just as they are also unable to perceive and understand the creational natural laws and recommendations. What I would like to ask is this: is there anything concerning predictions, especially concerning the financial crisis you spoke of recently, then also concerning earthquakes, etc.?
A true word concerning the things between heaven and earth, which the wisdom of the school does not dream of. As far as your question regarding predictions is concerned, the first thing to point out is that what I said on August 11th about the bank collapse in the USA has now begun to come to light and has led to a real recession, which is still being denied by the USA. The whole thing is taking on a much wider dimension, because now big banks are also being caught up in the maelstrom of the financial crisis, which is also happening today in a special case, because they have gotten themselves into such debt that they can no longer sustain themselves, which is why the state is being forced to intervene with very substantial financial resources. A comprehensive crisis is now being triggered by the bank Lehman Brothers in the USA, which is collapsing and in which many European banks, shareholders, speculators, and small savers have invested large amounts of money, which they are now not getting back again, or only to a small extent, as a result of which many investors in Europe are also losing all or part of their money. However, what is happening in the USA from today on is only the precursor of the whole thing, because in the course of time other banks will follow in America, as well as the world's largest bank, Citigroup, and others. Worldwide, the debt disaster increases to around 30 trillion euros. And already at the beginning of October, the whole thing spreads to such an extent to Europe that a whole series of large, small, and credit banks, as well as insurance companies, corporations, and companies, can only escape ruin by having hundreds of billions of euros injected into them by other and even better off banks and the state. This also includes the major Swiss bank UBS. The whole thing has serious consequences for the financial world and for the economy as a whole, which is also reflected in extremely high global and rising unemployment, driving even large and long-established corporations and companies to ruin. The way things are shaping up in the coming period, a comprehensive and serious global recession is no longer avoidable. The state of Iceland will even drive itself to the brink of bankruptcy as a result of the financial crisis, as will Latvia, while the financial debacle continues to spread and, as I said, also has a very strong impact on the global economy in general. With regard to earthquakes, there is also a lot to be said for them. A major quake of strength 6.6 occurs on October 6th in Kyrgyzstan, which is repeatedly severely affected by earthquakes, whereby a whole town is completely destroyed and human lives will also be lost. During the same period, Tibet is also shaken by a quake of magnitude 6. Towards mid-October, there is a strong seaquake of magnitude 5.2 far off the coast of Greece, followed by a strong quake in southern Mexico of magnitude 6.4. After mid-October, the state of Yemen is hit by unusual storms which cause major flooding, destroying thousands of residential buildings and killing around 250 human beings. On Wednesday, October 29th, you will be reminded of Quetta in Pakistan, where your daughter Gilgamesha was born. Because on this day, it turns out that only about 60 kilometers from Quetta, the capital of Balochistan, two earthquakes of magnitude 6.4 and 6.2 occur in quick succession. These will cause extensive damage to residential buildings, leaving over 100,000 people homeless, but hundreds of human beings will also lose their lives. According to this, it will be unusually heavy snowfall for 2 days in your area and throughout Switzerland, the likes of which have never been seen before since the month of October. Then, on the 1st of November, the famous deep-sea and stratosphere researcher Jacques Picard will die at the age of 86. He had dived to the deepest depths of the sea and had been taken to the highest altitude ever reached in a stratosphere balloon. Then, on the 4th of November, there are the U.S. presidential elections in which Barack Obama will be elected, as I already explained to you. Then there will be a 6.5 magnitude earthquake in the province of Qinghai in China, which in this respect will not calm down in the foreseeable future and will still be affected by very severe quakes. Just as in Indonesia, where a severe seaquake of magnitude 7.7 will occur off the island of Sulawesi on November 16th, followed by other severe quakes which will terrify and frighten human beings. As the last extraordinary event, on Wednesday, November 26th, a serious and multiple terrorist attack by Islamist fanatics will take place in various hotels in the Indian city of Bombay, where many people will be killed and injured, with also great destruction caused by fires and explosions. These are the predictions I can give until the time when I return from holiday and visit you again.
So we're not exactly looking at rosy times? How U.S. President George Walker Bush ruined the U.S. as a whole in just 8 years, ruining everything possible that made up the wealth, welfare, work, and security of U.S. citizens. In the same vein, the bank bosses, bank managers, and bank board members acted in a way that unjustly enriched themselves with scrounged and unearned horrendous salaries and bonuses, and plunged the whole world unscrupulously and irresponsibly into a financial catastrophe that, as you say, is really happening. This means that more sectors of the economy are now also suffering increased damage and are also falling into insolvency. The financial sharks have acted unscrupulously and irresponsibly, and will probably continue to do so in the same way as before, if they are not finally put a stop to their activities by effective state laws, and if they are not held accountable for their criminal actions. It is to be feared, however, that the state powers are far too lax in their actions against the greedy money sharks, because they themselves are dirty in the same way. Many company and corporate bosses and their managers also did the same for years and decades, sold their companies and corporations or ruined them financially completely, which also caused the collapse of large parts of the economy, which is probably still happening. This, however, has also led to a huge increase in unemployment, which has also increased the misery of human beings and crime. But this also means that the longer human beings think only for themselves and for their own well-being and necessities of life, the more they think for themselves and for their own well-being and necessities of life, the whole process of the financial and economic crisis, and the rising unemployment as well as the constantly increasing overpopulation creates an ever more extreme alienation among human beings and a mistrust of each other. By this, I mean that human beings are becoming more and more alienated from each other, and that they are showing more and more indifference, compassion, irresponsibility, and even hatred towards each other.
There is no doubt that what you say is true. And as far as the collapse of companies and corporations and banks is concerned, it is indeed threatening and inevitable. First and foremost, the entire global automotive industry will be affected, but this will only be in addition to other industries that will suffer the same fate. The process is not to be stopped.
Let's talk about something else, because the majority of human beings only laugh about it when confronted verbally with the truth. The human beings of the earth are not yet ready to orient their thoughts, feelings, and actions, as well as their entire behavior, according to the creational natural laws and recommendations, because money, power, pleasure, as well as addictions and vices are closer to them. Since my childhood, since I can remember, I have been trying to respect and obey the creational natural laws and recommendations.
It is an undisputed fact that all that you consciously and freely reveal in words, thoughts and feelings, in actions, in work and deeds, reveals your true nature and the level of your personality, as well as your character, attitude, and virtues. But this also includes the way you approach and treat other human beings, the way you respect and appreciate them as human beings, and also those who express dishonest, spiteful, evil, or otherwise undignified behavior. As human beings, you always show them the necessary respect. In the truest sense, you are a human being like an open book. You are a human being who is honest and open and also shows who and what you really are. So you not only have a certain image that you show off, but you also correspond to it. You undoubtedly know how to open the door of your ego very wide, for which you reap trust from all those human beings who really know you and therefore also show you their love. This is also the real reason why they perceive you as you really are. But what I do not like is that you work too much, because I have noticed that your health is not the best, as it often is, for quite some time now. So you should be a bit more moderate in your work, which should also include not to continue with the translations into English, because this work should be done by Marianne and Willem alone.
A beautiful bouquet of flowers. Thank you. Do you know what you say about the translation work? You are probably right there as well as with the other work. Your suggestion would also suit me, but it is to a certain extent unavoidable that I work with Marianne and Willem, because some passages probably need my explanations and finding the correct English terms. Yes, unfortunately, the English language is not equal to German, as it is also with regard to other languages, which are just as poor in terms of translation possibilities as is the case with English. And with regard to the other, human beings who know me, everything applies to them, but those who make enemies of me, for whatever stupid reasons, they are also not concerned with the truth. Their actions and behavior is quite shabby, which I can object to. But I still see them as human beings, and as such I must appreciate them. So I cannot judge them as human beings as unjust, evil, lying, and slanderous, but only their actions and behavior in this respect.
I know this, and if what was said was not your way, then you could also not be devoted to your mission. The kind of human beings who are not concerned with the truth in the above-mentioned respect are self-dictators who suffer from fantasies of omnipotence and pathologically acute hubris. In my opinion, this includes all those adversaries who do not know you personally and have never spoken a personal word to you, but who nevertheless dare to defame you as a liar, cheat, swindler, sectarian, and guru. By their actions in this regard, they can very well be recognized as unjust and unjust, as well as enemies of truth, egomaniacs, and self-important people. They think that they are wise and knowledgeable, but they are indeed afflicted with great and profound stupidity, which they are not able to recognize because they have hidden paranoid and psychopathic impulses, which they try to hide from other human beings by means of a great pseudo-intelligence. And what you say about the English and also other languages, I can only agree with you.
As the saying goes, by their fruits you shall know them. But if I may ask a question regarding your languages, what is happening when you have to translate my works into them?
Our main language leads back to the old Aryan language, from which on earth the old German languages have come forth, and from which the German in use today developed, through which everything can be expressed just as precisely as in our language. We can, therefore, translate your works precisely into our languages.
Aha, that's one thing I wanted to know for a long time. But now something other and, therefore, a question. During the 424th official conversation of the 17th of June 2006, you told me that the black men, those who wanted me to separate from my boots, to kill, had been captured at last. You said the following: since their last evil actions against you, the Syrian black men have been seized by forces from their home world and have been taken prisoner. And also during the 452nd official conversation of the 7th of July 2007, this was mentioned. Now I've been asked about how this came about. Can you give me details?
I can explain the following. Through our information about a technical innovation that we had received from the Sonans, The Syrian scientists were able to register the Men in Black's start, flight, and destination coordinates, which had been encrypted to such a degree that they could not be decrypted for a very long time. After having obtained the destination coordinates, it was detected that they lead to the planet Mars in the Sol system. Consequently, in the year 2006, Syrian security forces were mobilized who are in possession of space technology that makes it possible to switch between space and time configurations. Those forces secretly started with the aim to catch the Men in Black on planet Mars. On the planet, they found very ancient and functioning stations of former occupants or inhabitants, which were used by the Men in Black. From those bases, they planned the assassination attempts on you and also pursued other evil machinations on Earth towards groups of Earth humans. The Men in Black were taken prisoner, and all stations were totally eliminated, just as it was the case with all monuments and other things that were erected by the former inhabitants of the planet.
Does this mean that now no human-built artifacts can be found on Mars? Why did they do this?
That's the meaning of my words, because all of such artifacts had been removed. Therefore, only natural artifacts can be found now that were created by nature, as I had once remarked to you during a private talk. You then did not ask why only naturally created artifacts can be found on Mars, though. I do not attribute this to your inattentiveness, but to your bad health situation at that time when I told you this. And regarding the total elimination of everything by the Syrian forces that lead back to the former inhabitants, the reason for this was that it is a Syrian law that everything has to be totally eliminated wherever criminal actions have occurred. This applies to human acquisitions of all kinds on certain locations, as well as on entire planets, if such are not inhabited by a human population, which was also the case with Mars.
Maybe you have told me everything, but I only remember that you told me that only natural artifacts can still be found on Mars. Somehow there's a hole in my memory, because I may not remember that we had spoken about what you have said regarding the finding of the Men in Black on Mars and the removal of all human artifacts. But since we are talking about Mars, the red planet, the red meteor comes to my mind, of which it is written in a prophecy. I don't know it exactly anymore, but Quetzal told me that it will enter into Earth's orbit even if the prophecy regarding the Earth humans' evil machinations and wars would not be fulfilled, because the appearance of the meteor is not a prophecy, but a prediction, and therefore a cosmic event. If I remember correctly, he said that the great danger by the meteor would threaten Earth on the 13th April 2029, while at the same time he also named a date for the year 2036.
You are wrong. I have not spoken about the Syrians eliminating all human artifacts on Mars, because what I've just told you, I told you never before. Obviously, you had an intuitive grasp of everything. And what to say about Quetzal's prediction regarding the meteor, I can only confirm his information.
Misunderstanding regarding Mars. Excuse me, but regarding the elimination of human achievements or acquisitions. This in part is also the case here on Earth. Many things are destroyed and eliminated at certain locations if they are connected to criminal acts. I only find it strange that all of those things have been eliminated on Mars that did not belong to the criminal Syrians, but to the former inhabitants. But law may be simply law, other humanities and planets, other laws, etc. And regarding the red meteor, I just wanted to be sure.
The eliminations on Mars are as they are, and it cannot be made undone, even if it may seem strange to outsiders.
How right you are. That's why one should not search for a deeper meaning.
Then something else. Regarding the 469th contact report of the 11th of August 2008, I was asked some questions, especially about Caradwina, the sister of your grandfather, Ezekiel.
Why was she chosen for the task of teaching Merlin the teachings of Enoch? Was she an Eshrish? And why did she make a radiant sword for Merlin, the Excalibur respectively Caladvolch, which he gave to his disciple King Arthur, who then killed with it in bloody battles? And what role did Merlin play in the murder of King Gorlas of Tintagel?
Caridwena was not an Ishrish, but a teacher with regard to some activities, and also a teacher with regard to Enoch's teaching. This teaching activity was decisive in that she was chosen for the task of teaching Merlin in the teaching of Enoch, who, however, did not know that Caridwena was not an earth woman, but a Pleiaranin. She fell in love with Merlin and granted him various wishes, because he saw on various occasions that she had abilities far beyond anything he could explain as a druid. One such wish was also the making of the Excalibur. Furthermore, Caridwena was very fond of Merlin because he did a lot of good for the human beings and was wise to a great extent. Caridwena also told him many things of the future, which she had fathomed through foresight. But Merlin then used these to ascribe them to himself and to mention them as prophecies. Unfortunately, however, Merlin was often fickle, which is why he also did things that went against good, which saddened and even enraged Caridwena, so that she finally ended the secret relationship with Merlin, which nobody really knew anything about. When Caridwena was able to wield the Excalibur again after the death of King Arthur, she destroyed it and returned to Era.
And the murder of King Gorlas, what role did Merlin play in that?
The assassination was not in his mind. The kidnappers murdered the king of their own accord, because he threatened them with the death penalty and also stood up to them.
You mentioned earthquakes in your predictions, and I have a question regarding those, because I received a question from Germany regarding a so-called swarm earthquake. In the areas of Bohemia in the Czech Republic and Saxony in southeastern Germany, a large swarm earthquake has been said to have been shaking the earth from time to time for many decades. But this has happened before and has happened again and again for centuries. What is meant by a swarm and what is going on there? Within a short time, there are to be thousands of earthquakes, which are to occur again and again with a strength of about 4.5 of the Richter scale.
The events are known to me. These are the following. The events take place in a large area, namely in the southeastern Fotland, in the border area of Germany and the Czech Republic. And when one speaks of a large and continuous series of earthquakes, as is the case in any area, then the series of earthquakes is called a swarm. According to our observations and investigations, a new series of earthquakes, or swarm, will occur in that area towards the end of September of this month, whereby the earthquakes will increase slightly in strength, thus exceeding the usual level. Simply explained, the reason for all this is based on an underground and quite active volcano at great depth, which presses magma upwards and also releases the volcano's helium-3 gas to the outside. In addition, the groundwater is heated by the heat of the magma and creates huge masses of water vapor, which together with the water blows up the subterranean rock, causing the tremors. Heated water also penetrates to the surface, which is used by the earth humans of those areas. So, there are thermal springs there, and they largely prevent worse effects from occurring. Nonetheless, the hot magma masses of the volcano press on the roof, high above the volcano, in such a way that the rock and soil layers are increasingly bulging, just like in the Eifel in Germany and Yellowstone Park in the USA.
So then, one day suddenly the magma could explode up and be spat out of the earth as lava, as it also happened in Yellowstone Park in America about 600,000 years ago, and in the Eifel in northwest Germany or something like that, and will happen again one day.
That will indeed happen, just as it happened once before about 300,000 years ago.
Interesting. Only you never hear about these earthquakes in those areas. It would be interesting for many human beings to know what is happening there.
If you think that can be changed, then that can be changed, because I can arrange for an Earth humans to be impulsively influenced by us to write something about it when the new earthquakes occur at the end of the month.
Good idea. Then I will look for it in the newspapers. Yes, you know that here on Earth, the stupidity of the opponents of genetic engineering is leading to the destruction of plants and seeds through acts of vandalism for genetic experiments. This, of course, makes it very difficult for genetic engineers to make food plants and fruit and vegetables more resistant to diseases and pests. But it also makes them more productive, which could solve many problems relating to hunger among the human beings of the Earth. However, I believe that genetic engineering in respect of plants, fruit, and vegetables could also solve problems of medicine, because certain substances could also be used in this application. Of course, it is true that genetic experiments are bound to fail or be unpleasant, as is inevitable with anything and everything that is developed, so mistakes can be made. Yes, but this must not be a reason to stop the developmental attempts and not to continue. Because if that were to happen, then the development would stand still, and in fact, from time immemorial, there would also never have been one. Unfortunately, however, it is the case on Earth that with regard to innovations, whole hordes of fools and dumb people always come together who protest against further developments and new things and try to prevent them, whereby as a rule false information by know-it-alls, critics, and other opponents makes the rounds. Thus, fear and cowardice arises in many who believe the misinformation, from which the misinformation believers gather together and try to prevent the new developments with destructive actions. But what they do with it in terms of development and a better standard of living cannot be guessed or understood by those who are beaten with stupidity and stupidness. And a human being who simply runs around as a blind follower of any slander, lies, false teachings or assertions, who causes destruction or even misleads other human beings through falsehood, can really only be beaten by stupidity, and stupidity just as those who fall into pro and contra for warmongers and their criminal machinations.
This is clearly stated and corresponds to how it really is.
I think so too, which is why I said it. But would it be possible that you could give an indication as to how the genetic engineers have to proceed in order to really achieve successes in genetic engineering that are on the true path and bring about those successes that have to be achieved in principle? In my opinion, research and manipulation are simply going in the wrong direction.
The fact that in genetic engineering research and manipulation of plants, fruits, and vegetables is carried out in the wrong direction is really in accordance with what is given. The mistake that is made in the whole thing is that foreign genes are manipulated with foreign genes, instead of using species-specific genes for the experiments. Hybrids are created by genes foreign to the species, and these do not correspond to what has to be, because under certain circumstances, hybrids can produce toxins that can have very harmful effects on human beings and animals and on plants of all kinds. Only in rare cases can foreign genes be used in genetic manipulation and bring effective, good and valuable hybrid successes. While genetic manipulation with species-specific genes is of great value, beneficial and solves many problems for Earth humans, whether in relation to food of all kinds, medicine, or living standards. So if genetic engineers use the genes of fruits, plants, and vegetables for their experiments, only then will they take the true path.
Your answer is to start something. If the genetic scientists listen to it and work in this way, then they will certainly also soon have good results. But the whole thing does not solve the problems of overpopulation, which is destroying nature more and more.
That is of correctness, because the overpopulation on Earth and the destruction of nature caused by it is the biggest problem of all. The constantly growing population of the Earth demands more and more building of fertile land for dwellings and factories, as well as for many other things, such as sports fields, ski resorts, etc., which are completely senseless. By building up fertile land needed for food production, it is not enough, because a lot of land is also being destroyed, such as meadows, fields, alluvial areas, and forests, by all kinds of nonsensical buildings and installations, and by the introduction of chemical fertilizers and toxic substances. Wild animals and all creatures suffer from this, from the smallest to the largest of all. Many no longer find the necessary food for them, but also no longer find the necessary habitat, and therefore, according to our researches, 3671 genera and species are currently dying out. In relation to plants and to large, small, and smallest mammals, fish, birds, reptiles, and smallest living creatures that belong to the world of insects and the like.
And when various creatures go extinct, especially insects like bees, ants, wasps, hornets, and many others, it also has a devastating effect on the life of human beings.
But this is not generally thought about because very few Earth humans take care of these things. But it is a fact that the existence of Earth humans is in many respects dependent on their plant, animal, and creature world. The indifference and greed for profit makes many people go over the death of innumerable living beings and even over the death of human beings when it comes to accumulating their wealth.
A great many human beings on Earth, we would say, for their profit and wealth. And all those who destroy and annihilate nature and the world of animals and creatures, they live only for their own material well-being, for their greed for possession and wealth, just as the powerful and the bank and economic managers do. The state powers suck the people dry with nonsensical and horrendous taxes and instigate bloody wars and Secret Service terrorist acts, while the great economic and banking managers collect millions and drive the corporations, companies, and banks into bankruptcy. And all their motto is always the same, that they only care for themselves, and they don't care what happens when they disappear from the scene. They do not care about the hardship and misery, the collapse of financial markets, unemployment, and many other evils that result from their wrong, criminal, and often criminal actions. Their thinking only moves in relation to their own profit and their personal well-being, while all other human beings can die miserably next to them, although it is they who satisfy their financial greed for profit, and can even eke out an existence, because they are not able to defend themselves and exploit them to the point of blood. Their only thought is after me the flood.
As usual, you call the facts by their true name.
At an official contact meeting, you told me that in Asia many human beings are dying from arsenic poisoning because the groundwater is poisoned. Question: how does this poison get into the groundwater? Is it caused by arsenic sprays against vermin, etc., which then settle into the Earth's interior and thus into the groundwater?
The groundwater is not poisoned by arsenic-containing sprays against vermin, etc., but by arsenic naturally occurring in nature, which is deposited in the rock in the mountains. Rain and meltwater cause the arsenic to dissolve from the rock and ultimately flow into the groundwater, which is then naturally used by human beings as drinking water. Such arsenic-containing rock in the mountains, however, is not only found in Asia, but also in many other mountains on all continents, where the natural poison is also washed out by water and ends up in the groundwater and thus in drinking water. However, the intensity of the poisoning and the leaching as well as of the arsenic's penetration into drinking water varies. The greatest intensity being in Asia, where, according to our calculations, around 145 million human beings are contaminated by the poison, many of whom languish and die miserably. The evil is also great in Africa, but not to the same extent as in Asia down to Sumatra, where the great mass of overpopulation is the decisive factor in the many cases of illness and death.
You've told me about this problem before, and you said that human beings get cracked and split soles of feet from arsenic poisoning, and they get black and rot just like toes.
This is of correctness, but this is only one of the advanced symptoms.
I guess that's all there is to know. Is there any way to purify the groundwater of arsenic?
For earthly technology, at least for the time being, this is still an impossibility.
So it is likely that the evil of millions of contamination and deaths from the poison can only be alleviated by drastically reducing the human population in the affected countries through a widespread birth freeze.
This is actually the only possibility, because a much smaller number of human beings could be less poisoned by the arsenic-containing groundwater.
Providing good, healthy drinking water to human beings from other areas is impossible given the mass overpopulation that exists there.
The effort in every respect would be far too great to manage, even if many countries were to cooperate on such a project.
About the arsenic rock in the mountains. Do you really have arsenic rocks on every continent?
That is indeed the case, but the arsenic-bearing rock deposits and their arsenic content is predominant throughout Asia as a whole compared to other deposits on Earth.
Very unpleasant for the human beings there. But while we are on other continents, if I remember correctly, your daughter Simya Se once said that there was not a summer in 1816 due to a volcanic eruption. Can you say something about that?
I can, yes, because I was deeply involved with the events at that time. The year 1816 is known in the earthly annals as the year without summer. The reason for this is based on the fact that in the year 1816, a huge eruption of the 2,850-meter-high volcano, Tambora, took place in the north of the 13th and 980 square kilometer large Sundansel Sumbawa in Indonesia. During the ejection, about 156 cubic kilometers of lava were ejected and scattered over a huge area of more than 0.5 million square kilometers. The eruption caused drastic climatic changes worldwide, and consequently the weather also had catastrophic consequences, leading to crop failures and great famines all around, causing hundreds of thousands of human beings to starve to death all over the earth. This, in addition to the fact that the direct consequences of the volcanic eruption itself killed 16,182 human beings. As a result of the Great
Famine, human beings poached wild animals, which led to the total or partial extinction of many of them.
In the Northern Hemisphere, North America and Europe were particularly affected by the global impact of the volcanic eruption. The year 1816 brought huge changes in the weather, which meant that there was not really a summer, which is why 1816 was called the year without summer. The worldwide catastrophe triggered by the volcanic eruption produced negative effects over about 5 decades, which only slowly subsided.
While we are on the subject of Earth, do you know when life began to evolve from the very beginning on Earth? Quetzal once said that the first and lowest life could only develop through the activity of the glowing interior of the Earth, and through volcanic activity, etc.
That corresponds to the truth. Through the hot inner activity of the Earth, the first conditions for life were created, which developed as unicellular forms in and around the waters. The driving force for the first life, which developed about 4.46 billion 4 to 460,000 years ago, was the Earth's inner glowing power. This moved outwards through many different processes, such as volcanoes, mud and water geysers, underwater mud and smoke vents, hot springs and chemical vents, etc. In total, through the interaction of all these things, chemical compounds and possibilities were created, from which life was then able to develop.
There were also ice ages, heat waves, natural disasters, and cometary impacts, the latter of which brought chemicals to Earth.
That is also true. With regard to the ice ages, there were not only small and large ones, but also global ones. For example, about 700 million years ago, the Earth was trapped in an ice shield covering the entire planet, with an average temperature of minus 93 degrees Celsius, so the Earth was an extremely cold world. The fact that this could happen was based on the fact that during millions of years, the volcanic activity of the Earth calmed down extremely, and only small amounts of carbon dioxide entered the atmosphere, which, together with cosmic influences, led to the icing of the planet's surface. Then, however, about 630 million years ago, the inner earthly hot activity increased. Consequently, during millions of years, an increased and strong volcanic activity started, whereby the atmosphere was very strongly impregnated with carbon dioxide, whereby the atmosphere warmed up and the enormous ice masses began to melt about 600 million years ago. Large parts of the carbon dioxide settled back into the Earth and sank into deeper layers on the tectonic plates, which by submerging under other inner Earth plates and thus by movements pushed down and liquefied again in the magma area. The magma itself, thus enriched with carbon dioxide, pushed back up again and was ejected back into the atmosphere by so-called subduction volcanoes along with the lava, which reheated the atmosphere and started the melting process of the Earth's ice shield. This process has been maintained ever since, thus preventing the Earth's surface from cooling down again in the same way as it did then. The carbon dioxide also prevents the heat of the Earth's atmosphere from escaping into space through its cycle.
Yes, CO2 or carbon dioxide is an extremely important factor in climate regulation. However, it is of great importance for all life and the climate itself that the true measure is given. However, since human beings on Earth have been producing an enormous excess of CO2 for many decades through exhaust emissions of all kinds, they are destroying the carbon dioxide balance of the atmosphere, which is known to cause climate change and the resulting natural disasters. In fact, the climate change has already grown into climate destruction and climate catastrophe. But this is still vehemently denied by pathologically stupid know-it-alls who even call themselves scientists. Unfortunately, stupidity and stupidness is very difficult to deal with, so it is not dying out either.
Unfortunately, because knowledge and wisdom cannot be increased by stupidity, but only by a clear mind and logical reason.
How right you are. Stupidity and stupidness in relation to the better knowing of the sciences is like being brainwashed by false school wisdom and by religion. False wisdom and religion create an extremely nasty form of suggestive brainwashing, leading to delusional beliefs.
That is good and accurate.
Thank you. But tell me, Quetzal once said that the dwarf galaxies that orbit our galaxy, the Milky Way, are immigrants. What should we understand by that?
The Milky Way is orbited by a larger number of dwarf galaxies that have settled in the Milky Way region not so long ago. Of these, the two Magellanic Clouds are the most remarkable of a larger group of bright dwarf galaxies that formed their own small galaxy group billions of years ago, as is also the case with other small and dwarf galaxies that are very common. In the same way that such dwarf or small galaxies are assigned to larger galaxies, this also happens with individual solar formations that drift away from the outermost regions of younger galaxies and begin a journey through space, only to be captured again by a larger galaxy. So it happens that in older galaxies there are also suns that are younger than the galaxies themselves.
Can black holes also form in dwarf galaxies, or is this only true for large galaxies?
They can also occur in small galaxies and dwarf galaxies, as well as in free space, where black holes have been formed since the formation of the matter belt.
Then black holes are not necessarily dependent on galaxies to form?
No, because black holes can also form in free space due to very specific circumstances.
And what are these circumstances?
I am not allowed to talk openly about that because I have to leave the research of these things to earthly scientists. For them, it must be enough to know that black holes also originate in free world dream.
And so this is only possible in the matter belt, which our scientists mistakenly see as the universe, because they don't know that the matter belt is only one of 7 belts, while the other 6 contain no coarse matter.
Your assumption is true that black holes can only form in the matter belt, because only in the matter belt are the necessary conditions for their formation. In the other matterless universe belts, the formation of black holes is not possible.
Aha. Then the case is clear. Therefore, certain physical factors are necessary for this, such as vibrations or radiations, dark matter and fine matter, which compress and thus become so dense that they become an enormously heavy mass, and develop a tremendous gravity and thus an attraction of gigantic strength.
I am not allowed to give any information about that. It is also not given to me that I could consciously violate our directives.
I see. The case is clear to me. I also did not want to know more. What you are not allowed to explain, let it stay with you, because I don't want you to get into trouble and violate your directives because of me.
Then I am reassured. But I have to say that with certain questions you make it very difficult for me to give contactless answers.
I'm sorry, my friend, because I didn't mean to get you in trouble. Some things just interest me, which is also why I ask questions. But I don't want to get you in trouble, and therefore also don't want to provoke any meaningful answers. Yes, I know that you are not allowed to tell certain things openly, which I also respect. But if you want to confide something only to me, then there is nothing in the way.
I know that, and I also stick to it. Yes, my opinion was not a reproach, but only the statement that you think, recognize, and combine very logically in relation to a thing that is being talked about. Consequently, according to your own way, you then execute your question as a representation which already contains certain of your findings. This then makes it more difficult to answer your question without touching it, because as I said, it already corresponds to a cognition.
I was not hoping for more than a straightforward, respectively insignificant answer. But thank you, my son, for your opinion. Now, if you have a moment, I have a question.
What is it about?
Indigo children, is the term familiar to you?
Yes, I know this one. Why do you ask?
Yes, if you know the term. Then you surely also know that these are children of especially great and special intelligence. If possible, also higher or extraterrestrial beings born on Earth, who among other things are supposed to lead the earthly humanity in the future, if not to form it themselves. For my part, I classify the whole thing as nonsensical claims of esoteric and other delusional freaks. I also think that a certain autism plays a role in these children.
The whole thing is also not more than a nonsensical claim, and as far as autism is concerned, this is indeed true, even if it is not recognized.
What I am still interested in is a matter that Quetzal once raised privately in the 1980s in relation to the fact that it is not just that the climate change caused by overpopulation will bring about major catastrophes in the form of destruction of nature and storms of all kinds, but that there will also be problems that change the course of nature and its creatures. He spoke of the fact that, among other things, a worldwide jellyfish invasion will occur through the fault of human beings who, through their overpopulation, are destroying the climate in many ways, and who have just brought about climate change by force.
That with the enormous jellyfish invasion is indeed true, whereby this process already started in the 1960s and has expanded very strongly until today. Consequently, already many waters of trillions of the approximately 30,000 jellyfish of all kinds are contaminated worldwide. Of these, the smallest are only millimeters and centimeters in size, such as the sea wasps, which are life-threatening to human beings, while the largest are several meters in diameter. Many of them are very toxic and contain toxins that also kill human beings when they come into contact with the tentacles of jellyfish. It is human beings who are to blame for the enormous reproduction of jellyfish. Overpopulation has led to catastrophic overfishing and has created such pollution that it has also spread to the waters. Water pollution destroys the oxygen in the water, especially industrial waste, residues of medicines, chemical fertilizers, antibiotics, and human excrements, which are discharged into the waters and have caused and continue to cause water pollution. This results in so-called dead waters, in which various types of jellyfish can reproduce very well, usually feeding on fish, small organisms, and plankton, etc.
30,000 species of jellyfish, to my knowledge. Only about 3,000 are known to our marine biologists, etc. But what can be done about this jellyfish invasion? I think I already know your answer to this question, namely that the masses of jellyfish will only regress if the old state is restored, which means that humanity will be reduced worldwide through regulated birth control. Killing such masses of jellyfish is almost impossible.
There is hardly any other solution than to restore the original state of nature, because killing the jellyfish would only cause even greater problems. These creatures have the peculiarity that if they feel threatened in any way, they get rid of their sperm and eggs in large quantities, which are preserved in the water and thus lead to further and immeasurable masses of new jellyfish.
But it takes a long time to restore the necessary original state through a worldwide birth control. Because what has been destroyed in a short time by human beings in and around nature cannot be repaired overnight. Yes, the jellyfish are not even the only problem, because Quetzal also spoke of various other evil things that are waiting to break loose over the earth and mankind. When I think of what he said in this regard, I am terrified.
But we should not talk about that openly now. Quetzal also explained things to you only in confidence that you would keep quiet about it or only talk about it when the time came.
Yes, of course. I had not intended to mention other things to come, because I gave him my word to keep quiet. But since the jellyfish plague is now known, at least to a certain extent, I didn't bring the conversation to something I still have to keep quiet about.
Of course, you're right, because you're not obliged to keep quiet about what we talked about anymore, because at least some parts of it have become the knowledge of scientists and other Earth humans.
Exactly.
Time has passed, so now it is time for me to go. We will meet again at the end of November. Until then, dear friend, farewell and take care. Goodbye.
Dear friend, may you also be safe and sound on your holiday. The time will be long for me until the next reunion. Please give my best regards to Simya, Se, and Asket, because I assume that you will also visit them during your vacation. Bye and have a good time.
My way will also lead me to them, so I will pass on your greetings. Then goodbye again.
Goodbye also again, dear friend. Saklomi. Sat.